Anas Gomati is founder and director of Sadeq Institute, a public policy think tank on Libya. He joins us now via Skype from London. Thank you for coming on the programme. 1 year on since this offensive was launched, how do you believe the country has changed?
Well, it's transformed the aspirations of Libyans in a radical way. I mean, there were those that really felt passively about the transition and now feel that in the absence of justice, in the absence of any form of accountability a year on, many Libyans, I think, feel more committed to that cause. But I think also that it's changed the perspective that many Libyans have of the international community. We should remember that Libya's revolution was supported by the UN Security Council Resolution 1973, the responsibility to protect. And that doctrine really kind of carried on, not only and allowed the operation to take place, but really gave a lot of faith and a lot of hope for a lot of Libyans to be able to trust and engage positively with the international community. A lot of that good faith has been lost since April last year, I would say, in the absence of any kind of pressure, condemnation or sanction by the UN on the offending parties.
I mean, in that vein, let's talk about the flouting of the arms embargo. How much of that is fueling this conflict?
Well, only 2 months ago, we sat and listened to Angela Merkel say in Berlin on January 20th that this was it for Libya, that the international powers would accept and respect an arms embargo. 2 months on, in fact, there have been more embargoes in the last, violations of that embargo in the last 2 months by the UAE in eastern Libya than in the last 5 years put together. And I mean, there's a massive, massive push to arm Haftar after that exercise in hypocrisy. And it's the absence of doing more than just saying, we're going to help here, countless empty statements that have been made. And I think that's really the danger here, is that there is no shortage of conferences on Libya. There are no shortage of meetings or statements that are being put out by the UN, for example, on Libya, or by the EU on Libya. But in fact, there's very little more than that, empty words and very little action on the ground. And I think that's really the key problem here, is that in the absence of an arms embargo, a real arms embargo, you can't expect the players on the ground to think that peace looks lucrative. They have more weapons now than they had 2 months ago. Why would they stop fighting? And in that sense, particularly for Haftar, why would he stop fighting, or why would he be afraid of an international community when they're not even making threats? I mean, there is no condemnation, there will be no sanctions. So he can continue in the same vein. We shouldn't forget, this is the second civil war that he's sparked in 5 years. This is the second time the UN has attempted to broker peace in Libya, and it's the second time they've failed to do so.
Speaking of the UN, Antonio Guterres has said that there has been some progress in the country after he called for a global ceasefire due to the coronavirus outbreak. How vulnerable is the country to coronavirus, and are we seeing that on the ground, what Guterres is actually saying?
No, sorry, he's lying. Make it as clear as that. That's not true. So he's either made a mistake or he's lying. That's one of the two. There has been a massive escalation of violence. There were at least 23 civilians that were killed in the last 2 weeks alone. There was a massive upscale in violence in Tripoli. All three axes of the front lines in Tripoli moved on the same day. There's been an upsurge of violence. There are more operations now, not only in Tripoli, but in western Libya and in Al-Woutia, in central Libya and Misrata. There are more airstrikes now than there have been since January 20. I mean, it's a lie to say that there is less war. There is more war now. And in fact, it's probably the cover of COVID-19, the global distraction that has allowed for this, in the way that, in fact, there was so much of a distraction in January after the assassination of General Soleimani in Iraq. And in that sense, there was a huge upsurge in strikes in Tripoli. Today, that is very much the same thing, but on steroids. There is no appetite to watch what is happening in Libya. And those that are perpetrating those crimes, sustaining that war and pushing that forward, feel absolutely no sense of pressure. And that's why they're making a land grab. There might even be a land grab towards the Tunisian-Libyan border. There's been an upsurge of violence towards there in the last 10 days. It's huge what is taking place there. But in fact, this unnecessary war, and that's the real problem here, that not only are these numbers and these stats don't give you the real picture, the public health system in Libya has been overwhelmed. The first of those that were to die on April 4th, 2019, were the countless number of doctors, paramedics, first responders, hospitals and ambulances and field hospitals that were destroyed within April, May and June and July of last year. How is that going to be a system that can have any sense of response or any form of resilience for what is to come and what is looming only 45 kilometers, 50 kilometers away, is southern Italy, Palermo, that is overwhelmed by COVID-19. Can you imagine what the numbers look like in Libya? Can we imagine that going into the summer months, there might be a huge upsurge of migrants and refugees that cross over into Europe after their second, well, it could be the impending second wave, it could be at a time when the numbers are dwindling in Europe and they have a massive fear or hostility towards people that are running away from bullets and bombs in Libya.
It's a vulnerable country, to say the least. Absolutely. Thank you for your time. We'll have to leave it there. Anas El Gomati, founder and director of Sadeq Institute.
Thank you.